Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Paris Schutz is on assignment. On the show tonight,
the loss of power in Puerto Rico could very well mean the loss of lives.
Hurricane Fiona hits Puerto Rico. Chicagoans issue a call for action.
Decent, honorable, and all about service.
Queen Elizabeth II is laid to rest. A look at the ceremony and what lies ahead for Great Britain. Checking out the growing number of challenges to books in schools and libraries. We hear from a concerned parent and a free speech advocate. Lawsuit after lawsuit. Critics are calling for more transparency from Mayor Lightfoot's administration after it's repeatedly denied access to public records.
You go into another restaurant, you see who you hope is a good employee and ask them what they're getting paid, and I'll give you $2 or $3 more.
Begging, borrowing, and stealing. That's how one restaurant owner is describing the industry's worker shortage. The developer behind the Lincoln Yards mega project plans to create a large apartment building nearby. That and more from Cranes.
I wanted it to look non-traditional. I didn't want the lines to be clean.
And exploring the impact art can have on mental health. But first, some of today's top stories. Hurricane Fiona brought more rain to Puerto Rico today, intensifying catastrophic flooding after the storm first hit the island on Sunday. More than 1,000 stranded residents have been rescued and at least one person has died. The storm has knocked out power and water to most of the island, and we'll hear more about the situation and get local reaction in a moment. Queen Elizabeth II was laid to rest today. The burial was preceded by a state funeral that drew world leaders and massive crowds mourning the loss of the 96-year-old monarch. The service ended with 2 minutes of silence observed across the United Kingdom, with attendees then singing the national anthem, now titled God Save the King. More details on today's ceremony later in the program. An Illinois man held hostage in Afghanistan for more than 2 years is being released. Navy veteran Mark Frericks spent more than a decade in Afghanistan as a civil contractor and was abducted in January 2020. He was believed to have been held by a Taliban-linked network. Frericks is being released in exchange for Bashir Noorzai, a convicted Taliban drug lord jailed in the U.S. In a statement, President Joe Biden says Frericks' release is, quote, the culmination of years of tireless work by dedicated public servants across our government and other partner governments. I spoke with Mark's sister today to share the good news and express how happy I am for Mark's family. Up next, more details on the devastating hurricane that hit Puerto Rico. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Puerto Rico is battling devastation caused by Hurricane Fiona. Chicago area residents of Puerto Rican descent say it calls attention to past wrongs and opportunities for change. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda.
Brandis, Tyra Cintron was born and raised in Chicago, but moved to Puerto Rico in 2010. She'd planned to stay, but in 2017 moved back just days before Hurricane Maria hit.
We were actually living without water and light for a month already because of the tropical storm Irma. And maybe, life continued. And then we saw how bad Hurricane Maria was getting. So my mom begged for me to come back to Chicago.
She and her kids, it's because Hurricane Maria was a Category 4 storm that wreaked utter havoc on the island archipelago, a commonwealth that's an unincorporated U.S. territory. Now, thousands died, power was knocked out for weeks, months even.
Thousands of families that live in houses that still have blue tarps on them after Hurricane Maria. And we were talking about the 5-year anniversary of Hurricane Maria is tomorrow. And we still do not have an infrastructure in which Puerto Rico can survive even a Category 1.
A Category 1 storm like Hurricane Fiona, which whipped through Puerto Rico, causing mudslides, massive flooding with that water wiping out bridges, and again, leaving Puerto Ricans without power.
Not having power in Puerto Rico means no clean water. Not having power in Puerto Rico means the individuals do not get to store and keep their medicine, well. That means not having power in Puerto Rico means the people who are in hospitals on respirators or attached to any type of treatment that requires power cannot get that treatment or cannot have working respirators.
Jesse Fuentes of the Puerto Rican Agenda of Chicago says the situation then and now has exposed that Puerto Rico does not get the same treatment in climate emergencies as just, say, Texas or other U.S. southern states.
Hurricane Maria exposed the consequences of colonialism, right? I think that Hurricane Maria exposed the lack of resources that the government was willing to give an island like Puerto Rico. And I think that Hurricane Maria raised consciousness, not just on the island, but across the entire diaspora.
Raised consciousness and also built momentum for a true conversation, Fuentes says, about the impact of colonialization and spurred action towards decolonizing, like efforts to move Puerto Rico to a point of self-determination, when all that looks like, Fuentes says, is for Puerto Ricans to decide, be it U.S. statehood, keeping its current status, or becoming an independent nation, even as in some ways, such as with a now privatized yet still troubled electric grid, things are moving in the opposite direction or not working. Already, though, Fuentes says things are going better than in 2017, than under the President Trump administration. Then, granted, this storm is not as strong, but also President Joe Biden yesterday approving an emergency declaration, which activates FEMA to coordinate and move on recovery efforts. Also, the Puerto Rican Agenda, which mobilized after Hurricane Maria, is now ready to jump into action again. State Senator Cristina Pacioni-Zayas says 5 years ago, the coalition swiftly raised $70,000.
And we quickly translated that into pallets of emergency supplies, right? Because at that point, money would not make sense. We need to get supplies over there, right? We were then able to leverage our relationships socially and politically to be able to secure a plane from United and get that plane out 5 days after the hurricane. We were the first community to land a plane. We did it 3 times over.
She says that action now can take various forms. For far too long, she says Puerto Rico has been an afterthought, and some aspects of reversing that, like, say, dealing with climate change, will take time, but others can be more immediate.
It's not just one thing. Some people need to understand, first and foremost, that Puerto Rico right now is a colony of the United States. Some people may not be aware of that, right? And how did that relationship come about? And how did that bring it to the point that it's at today, right? Some people are still grappling with, is climate change real? And here is a clear example that most indeed it is. And then some folks, really want the more concrete, right?
As in, yes, concrete cash donations. But she says this should be done without a savior mentality, making sure to give to organizations that have local connections. Now, meanwhile, Sachaira Cintron says her friends and family that are still in Puerto Rico are safe right now.
I think about Puerto Rico every day, but I am here and I'm actually going to be opening up my business here. Puerto Rican owned and, Puerto Rican related.
Planning to actually open that Puerto Rican coffee shop and cafe in Humboldt Park as soon as the next couple of weeks. Now, Governor J.B. Pritzker has offered a statement this afternoon in response to Hurricane Fiona. No direct promises of aid from the state, but saying that Illinois will offer any necessary support to victims, saying that Illinois is not in the business of turning away those in need, and we will continue to welcome these travelers and any Puerto Rican climate refugees seeking a safe place to land with all of our available resources. With that, Brandes, back to you.
Amanda, thank you. A nationwide effort to ban certain books from public school libraries has gained so much steam that more books have been banned so far this year than all of last year. The American Library Association says there have been 681 efforts to target more than 1,600 books between January and August of just this year. And a new report from the free speech advocacy group PEN America says it's not just concerned parents, but an organized effort to make politics out of what kids are reading. Joining us now are Terry Newsom, father of twins who attend Downers Grove South High School. He heads up the Illinois chapter of the group Parents Involved in Education. And Jonathan Friedman, director of free expression and education programs at PEN America. He was the lead author of this report. And thanks to both of you for joining us. Jonathan Friedman, let's start with you first. Please give us some of the main takeaways from your report, please.
Sure. PEN America is a 100-year-old free expression and literary organization, and our concern is with the ways in which school boards across the country are moving to restrict and diminish access to literature for young people. The top lines of our report is that we counted 2,500 efforts to ban and restrict access to books in school districts around the country, and this is spreading rapidly from Texas to Florida to Pennsylvania to right here in Illinois. The patterns are consistent, that people are producing lists of books online, bringing those to their school districts, and demanding that school districts abandon policies and procedures just to remove the books right away.
Terry Newsom, you're the parent of twins at Downers Grove South High School. You went to your very first school board meeting about a year ago. Tell us how you got involved in this issue.
So my twins were starting freshman year at Downers Grove South High School. Never been to a board meeting. Was raised Southwest Side Democratic Union family, came across some of the subject matter that's being presented in the school. Everyone knows about the masking and all these other things that were tied into this fight. Once I learned about some of the graphic material that was being offered to the children in school, that's when I really seriously got involved, was more vocal. A lot of parents are scared. You know, when you talk about these different groups and organizations that are popping up, they're parents. Those groups, those organizations are parents. Parents, they saw what was going on in our kids' schools during the COVID lockdown. So they started getting involved. And still to this day, many parents don't know about the graphic nature of some of these books. And I don't call us book banners, more like porn banners, the graphic books. The books to serve the LGBTQ community and the kids and helping them cope with their sexuality, that's fine. I mean, I said it numerous times, that's fine. Let's help those children do that. You know, but I don't think it's necessary on some of the books to show the graphic images of performing
Terry,
sex.
Are you referring to the book Genderqueer when you?
Yeah. I know sometimes I'm supposed to be careful on what you say and stuff. I shared the images with you, and unfortunately can't show them. And it's kind of ironic. It's like, you know, we're here on this show when my kid's superintendent looked us in the eyes and said, this is not pornography, but we can't show it. Even on some of the radio shows, we can't even talk about it. And so it's stuff like that. It's not the books to help the kids, not at all. It's just to be graphic.
Just to be clear, so we are looking at images from this memoir. It's about a coming of age as non-binary, and as Terry said, there are some images that are a bit too graphic for us to show here on television. But in the end, the Downers Grove School Board did vote to keep Genderqueer on the shelves. That said, it is the most banned book in the country right now. Jonathan, what is the case for keeping it on public school libraries?
Well, it is the most banned book, and for a reason. It's a graphic novel. It's easy for people to pick it up, thumb through it, but find objectionable. Look, schools have to serve their communities, and if there are a majority of parents who want to get involved and raise concern, that is their time. My concern is that in a lot of cases, processes that ought to be aren't being held. Gratified the book was, in many places it is not. The book Genderqueer in particular has also attracted controversy, let's be honest, because of its LGBTQ content in addition to its sexual. But the book has spoken to many young people. There are many parents out there who want to have access to that, you know, at a time when teenagers are under tremendous pressure to engage in sexual acts. A book that is really about a person's journey of wrestling with those pressures and wrestling to find a sense of self, you know, that book can be really helpful and speak to young people and teach them something. So my concern is that, you know, yes, do some people have a right to object to this book? For sure, but that can't be held to encroach upon other people's rights to read it, and even the rights of young people.
Terry, whose job would you say it is to decide what kids have access to? Is it the parents or teachers and librarians on school grounds?
I think there needs to be some sort of collaboration, but I'd like to address a comment that Jonathan made, that, why these books are being banned. Let's be honest, it's about LGBTQ. No, it's not. Absolutely nothing to do with LGBTQ. I sent into WTTW an email I sent before one of the appeals. I sent it to the principal. I said, please bring any and all heterosexual books that are like this, that have this type of sexual graphic. There is none. That's the only reason it's under these books. It's not like we're going, hey, let's go look under LGBTQ. There's none. I asked it, and his response, it's only about genderqueer. He didn't even give me an option. So I'm being attacked for something that, that is not the truth. And is with respect to them voting to keep the book in, the superintendent handpicked 7 people and teachers, wouldn't even tell us how. I asked him what groups they represent. He goes, that's irrelevant. I handed out that email about the principal trying to show these people during the appeal and other things. One of the guys that the superintendent picked, everything I handed out, he tore it up. He tore it in half and looked at me. So you can't say, okay, the parents voted to keep it in. No, it was a stacked, rigged kangaroo court. He didn't give us a chance to speak our voice. We had a chance to present to him. He, as the judge, allowed them to tear up everything that I was handing out and said nothing. So I just like to straighten that out. I think there needs to be a collaboration. I don't think that, I can't speak for the whole country, but the parents in my community are against the graphic pornography. I have a boy-girl twins, right? I don't want my son to be taught how to get oral sex. I don't want my daughter to be taught how to perform oral sex in a book. And each kid, even if you're gay or not gay, it's a challenge in high school. It's a challenge to have sex, and all those things are hard and difficult for the kids, right? But that doesn't mean because it falls under gay that you have gay privilege to say, hey, you can't criticize this or you're attacked as a homophobe. It's
Terry,
pornography.
Sure, I want to jump in here just because we're running out of time. But Jonathan, librarians seem to be finding themselves on the front lines of what seems to be a culture war. What are you hearing from librarians around the country about the precarious position that they're being put in here?
Well, just to address some of Terry's comments here, I think if you feel that you did not have a chance for your voice to be heard, if your comments were ripped up, that could be a source of concern. There ought to be ways for you to present your ideas. We live in a society with open debate and with, where our institutions have to reflect the diversity of ideas. Too often right now, it is librarians who are on the front lines who are, sometimes, and I don't know about Illinois, but in some cases experiencing personal harassment, doxing, death threats. That is just way over the line and totally uncalled for. Over what? A book in the schools that people should have their whole professional careers destroyed and their personal sense of their own expertise so deeply threatened. So we have to start with the starting point has to be a place of respect for how institutions are run, how public schools serve us all, and to the content in genderqueer. There is nothing in that book that is some kind of manual of how to engage in oral sex. Yes, it does have depictions, and yes, that is surprising considering the history of what has been allowed to be put in graphic novels that are available to young people. But there are legions of people who believe that kind of education and information ought to be readily accessible. And when you read that book from cover to cover, it's impossible to find those images titillating in some way. The book is about the main characters' feelings of asexuality and how off-putting they find those acts. In that sense, it's not really about sex at all. It's actually about not engaging in sex and that being okay
Jonathan,
too.
sorry, gentlemen, sorry, I'm going to have to jump in because we're actually out of time. Obviously, it's a lot to talk about here, so a discussion that we'll need to continue, of course. Jonathan Friedman and Terry Newsom, thanks to you both for joining us, though.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Critics are calling for more transparency from Mayor Lori Lightfoot's administration. Since she took office in 2019, more than 100 lawsuits have been filed against the administration for denying access to public information, including documents, emails, police body cam footage, and more. The Freedom of Information Act, also known as FOIA, allows public agency records to be accessed by the public upon written request. So here to unpack transparency among city agencies and the administration is Matt Topic, an attorney at Lovie & Lovie. He is also the founder of its Freedom of Information Act practice. And we should note, WTTW has consulted with Mr. Topic on FOIA requests in the past. We also reached out to the mayor's office for a statement, but have not received a response as of yet. Matt, thanks for joining us again. So, of course, we know the mayor, she ran on the idea of, quote, cleaning up city government. On her list of city government reforms from her 2018 campaign, number 5 is complying with FOIA and ending FOIA abuse. How is the Lightfoot administration doing when it comes to transparency?
Terribly, to put it simply. As you noted, and this is just our firm. I mean, we're not the only ones who even handle these cases. We filed 104 lawsuits for our clients in the last 2 years. In the vast majority of instances, there was nothing prohibiting the city from releasing those documents if they wanted to. They just chose to not provide them. And it really does, as you mentioned, kind of cover all aspects of city government, whether it's how money's being spent, how policing is being conducted, schools, park district, you name it. There's probably been a case we filed on the issue. Of those 104 suits, 54 of them were resolved in the last 2 years. 48 of them in our clients' favor. So the city's batting average is just absolutely abysmal. And it's gotten even worse in that not only is the city violating the baseline statute, when we sue, they frequently violate the rules in the lawsuit. They violate court orders. They violate deadlines that apply in lawsuits, requiring us to file motions for sanctions and motions for contempt. So it's really reached just sort of a new level of disregard for what the city's obligations are.
Matt, the Chicago Tribune recently won its case after the city, quote, fought to keep secret documents concerning alleged employee misconduct. What did this case reveal about how the city handles court rulings?
Well, I think it just shows another example of people having to fight to get records, and that's the Chicago Tribune. Imagine if you're not the Chicago Tribune, you're just a concerned citizen, or you're a very local, hyper-local newspaper without much of a budget, or you're community activist organization. Imagine how hard it is then. I mean, if they're willing to fight the Tribune, it's even more difficult for the average taxpayer or smaller organization.
Matt, what would you say is the most concerning about the way the office has been handling this?
Well, I think it's particularly frustrating when you have someone who ran on a transparency platform, and famously, bring in the light, I think was the slogan, and you showed the graphic of the press release, and that this was going to be a priority, and it really does increase distrust in government when government officials are not complying with their obligations to be transparent. It makes people think that the government is up to no good. It gives us no reason to trust government officials. And that's amplified many times over when, on top of it, it was someone who ran on that platform and said they were going to fix things and has not fixed anything. I made a FOIA request myself for calendar entries and agendas and anything that would show the mayor's personal involvement in any FOIA-related efforts. And there were all of 2 meetings over the course of the administration, one of which was, I think, the very first day. So this has not been taken as a priority, and it often comes from the top down. If you don't have a culture of transparency from the very top of the organization, then you're definitely going to have problems all around city departments, and you get the kind of situations we have here that ultimately it hurts the ability of the public to hold the government accountable, and it costs the taxpayers a lot of money when the city fights these cases and when they lose these cases.
Among which agencies would you say you're seeing the FOIA requests are most commonly denied?
The Chicago Police Department, I think I can say that without any hesitation, and that is particularly troublesome when a law enforcement agency is routinely violating the law. It sets a terrible example for people when the police department doesn't comply with its legal obligations. There have been issues with the park district and things related to the sexual abuse of lifeguards, lawsuits over that. You have things in contracting, you have things in the mayor's office. It really is pretty widespread.
And Matt, help us to understand, in what instances is the city able to legally deny a FOIA request?
There's a variety of examples. So if the police department could prove that it would harm an ongoing investigation to release a record, then they're allowed to withhold it. But they routinely will just say there's an open investigation and we won't give you anything, and that's not the law. I did the Laquan McDonald video case years ago, and that was the argument they made then, and they lost, and they continue to make that same kind of argument. Things like people's social security numbers, trade secrets, there's any number of things that can be withheld, but it's really important to know that rarely does the law say they're not allowed to release it. More often it says they can withhold it if they want to. So these are decisions that they are making that they don't have to make, and they're putting transparency and taxpayer money at risk every time they decide they're going to withhold a record.
And of course, you mentioned, the Laquan McDonald video, which fell under Mayor Rahm Emanuel at the time. How would you say the Lightfoot administration and their transparency compares to previous mayors?
It's not any better. I don't have statistics in front of me. We've just taken on more and more cases over time. So we probably had less suits against the Emanuel administration, but you can't necessarily correlate that to one being more transparent than the other. But what we're seeing now with this administration in the last 6 or 9 months is it would be as if after the Emanuel administration lost the Laquan McDonald case, they just decided they weren't going to release the video, even though a court told them that they had to. That's sort of what's new and particularly troubling.
Okay. And Matt, we've got about 10 seconds left. Have you heard much from the administration about this?
I haven't really heard any justification for why they're continuing to engage in this other than what they file in court where they routinely lose.
Okay. And that's a 10-second answer. Matt Topic, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Up next, a new exhibit exploring art therapy and mental health. Stay with us.
We've made it.
Justice Jackson's appointment to the Supreme Court provides a beacon of hope.
Black women are underrepresented. We still rise. We still show up for one another.
It's us investing in the next generation and giving them something to enrich the next generation with.
And there's much more ahead on the program, including reaction to Queen Elizabeth's funeral. But first, an Inglewood native is showing the impact art therapy can have on mental health in a new exhibition titled Therapeutic Reasoning. Arts correspondent Angel Edo takes us to a very serious gallery in River West for a look. And a note, some of the upcoming artwork is graphic.
When you think of the phrase, a lot can change in a year, it's one that could best be used to describe artist David Ellis and the role expression has played in his life.
So I had really aggressive suicidal ideation, and one of the first things that was listed on the safety list for me was to paint when I felt like really aggressive ideation come on. And so that's what I started doing. I just went back to what I remembered made me happy when I was younger, and it was just drawing.
When it came time to pay rent, Ellis, or eWorks, decided to sell paintings on his front lawn. It grew so successful, the self-taught artist decided to do it monthly.
And I had my first 2 sales, and as soon as people stop and are buying art and other people see people buying art, it just pulls more people's eyes in your directions.
Whether it be for himself or commissions, eWorks says he needs to paint every day.
People kind of ignore the need for art. And ignore the place it holds in society that gives everything meaning. Art is needed.
He shows that need for self-expression in a new exhibit at a very serious gallery in River West, where he documents societal moments in time with acrylic on canvas, each piece taking no more than a day.
So I'll take screenshots of celebrity moments, of pop culture moments, of things that are meaningful to me. Nothing is super intentional in terms of like what I create. It's always been for therapeutic reasons. Like I create to feel good, to feel normal, to balance myself, to center myself. It's never been about just solely the art. It's been about my healing.
While art and self-expression have helped eWorks improve his mental state, it's a practice he says he'll always have to work on.
I feel like it's important to know that it's not the end-all solution. It's not this thing that's gonna make you like just healthy for the rest of your life. It's a thing that you always know you can come back to center yourself.
The characters eWorks has created live in what he's called the day room and hopes his art dismantles racism, homophobia, and elitism, among other things.
Art has always been very intergenerational. I can engage with young people, people my age, older black folks. Oh, you don't like the picture of the penis? Wow, let's talk about it. A lot of it kind of speaks to my sexuality. I identify as fluid. So it's a talking point, and it creates like a bigger space for healing and understanding intergenerationally.
While the art eWorks creates is for his personal healing, he hopes it inspires Black and brown children specifically.
The investment has to start at some point, and there's no way around not spending the money and not spending the time and not practicing. Take creative agency over what it is you love to do, and like, don't let anybody else pilot your life decisions.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And you can see Therapeutic Reasoning at A Very Serious Gallery in River West through October 23rd. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, hundreds of thousands of people take to the streets of London for a glimpse of Queen Elizabeth's coffin as the monarch is laid to rest. Property owners of a Gold Coast staple are looking to revamp. We talk about that and other top business headlines with Cranes. And a new report shows restaurants are still struggling to find employees. A look at the reasons behind this worker shortage. But first, some more of today's top stories. Mayor Lori Lightfoot's pick for the zoning board is now her pick to lead the 43rd Ward. Timmy Knudsen, the chair of the city's Zoning Board of Appeals, has been chosen by the mayor to represent Lincoln Park in the city council. He'd replace Alderwoman Michelle Smith, who retired in August. Knudsen's nomination is headed to a city council committee before a final vote is expected by the full council on Wednesday. A jury rules a Willowbrook woman who survived breast cancer and thousands of others should be paid $363 million in damages by Sterigenics and 2 other companies. This because the jury ruled the now shuttered medical tool sterilization plant in Willowbrook exposed them to dangerous levels of cancer-causing ethylene oxide gas.
It's been a long 4 years. It was so good for our story to be able to get out because we were all handicapped not being able to talk about. My son was diagnosed with cancer last August with lymphoma. We couldn't talk about that. There's probably 800 people, following. So I hope this makes it easier for all of them.
Sterigenics and parent company Sotera Health told the Chicago Tribune they might appeal the verdict. Residents at an apartment complex in Rogers Park are alleging inhumane living conditions being faced by children, elderly, and poor residents of color. They say the management of North Point Apartments promised to address issues like replacing faulty stoves and rodent infestations earlier this year, but they say the company hasn't done so.
This is really a life or death situation for a lot of our families living in these units. You've got a unit that was flooded with standing water with open wires. You have children living in homes contacting lead poisoning. You have cancer patients living in these units without a working stove. Who in their right mind would continue to let this happen?
In a statement, Related Midwest, which owns and manages the apartments, says over the last year there have been $21 million in renovations and that, quote, we have been working closely with residents and community leaders to bring state-of-the-art updates to North Point, including installing a new roof, new windows, modern kitchen cabinets, appliances, and plumbing fixtures, along with updated flooring and LED lighting. The developer behind the Lincoln Yards mega project has plans for a large apartment building close by. A software company based in Finland is looking to hire more people at its U.S. headquarters in Chicago, and the building owners of the longtime Gold Coast establishment Tavern on Rush are eyeing an overhaul. Here to go behind the headlines is Crane Chicago business reporter Danny Ecker. Welcome back, Danny. So the developer behind the Lincoln Yards mega project on the north side, we've talked about it a lot, they've got plans to create a big apartment building nearby. First, please remind us what the Lincoln Yards mega project is and how big of an apartment building are we talking about here?
Yeah, so Lincoln Yards is a 55-acre mixed-use campus that developer Sterling Bay is really trying to get going on the north side between Lincoln Park and Bucktown. You may recall there was obviously a lot of coverage of this. They won approval from the city 3.5 years ago now for that whole mega project. So far, they've completed almost one building. It's a life sciences building where they're still hunting for tenants. Now, Sterling Bay is pitching plans for a 15-story, 359-unit apartment building on Kingsbury. It's actually just outside the Lincoln Yards site to the east. And the idea is they want to breathe some life into this project. And right now, it's far easier to get financial backing for apartments almost than anything else that they want to do at Lincoln Yards.
So software company Cievo, they're out of Finland but have U.S. headquarters here in Chicago. They're planning to hire more people locally. Tell us about that plan and what it says about Chicago's tech scene.
Yeah, Cievo makes business software that helps companies track spending. They just raised $44 million from a mix of investors to grow their team. They have about 40 employees here in Chicago now, but with the new funding, they say they're going to try to get to 200 in Chicago over the next 3 to 4 years. They aren't all engineering jobs. Most of them are in sales and customer support, but this kind of shows the value that tech companies from all over the world actually have historically and continue to place in Chicago for the young tech-savvy talent we have here, and the deep bench of corporations that use services like what Cievo offers. So it's an international win here for Chicago.
So longtime Gold Coast restaurant Tavern on Rush closing at the end of the year. Now the owners of the property, they're looking to revamp it. What do they have planned, Danny?
So far, they're saying they're going to give that building a major facelift. This is a very high-profile building on Rush Street, as many people know. Alderman Riley didn't give full details, but he said the owners of the building are basically taking the building down to the studs and making it look more modern, giving it a more efficient layout. So they're going to be putting a new restaurant concept in there. It's part of a broader refresh that we're seeing right now in that pocket of the Gold Coast. Carmine's next door was recently purchased. It's going to be knocked down and rebuilt with a new Carmine's in there. Gibson's Restaurant Group is looking to add second-story balconies to its restaurants there. So that whole block could look a little bit different in the next few years.
That's what I was going to say. It could have a new look. Danny Eckert-Cranes, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brandis.
It was a day of pomp and pageantry. Hundreds of world leaders and politicians, as well as hundreds of thousands more in the streets, came to say goodbye to Queen Elizabeth II. Before the funeral service began, a bell tolled 96 times, once for each year of the monarch's life. The last time Great Britain saw a funeral of this magnitude was in 1965, after the death of former Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill. It marks the end of an era as the world bids farewell to the longest reigning monarch of England and the beginning of a new one with her son, King Charles. Joining us now to break down today's ceremony and to talk about the future of England are Robert Buchholz, history professor at Loyola University Chicago, and Stephen Pincus, the Thomas E. Donnelly Professor of British History and the College at the University of Chicago. Welcome back to both of you. I think we just talked about this some time ago within the last 10 days. What were your impressions of today's funeral and all of the events of the last 10 days? I'll start with you, Robert, please.
First, it's important to remember this is actually the first state funeral of a deceased sovereign in Westminster Abbey since 1760. So nobody alive has seen anything quite like this. And by the way, that one was held at night. What struck me about the ceremony was, in fact, how traditional it was. Now, of course, we expect it to be traditional, but in terms of her choices of readings and her choices of music, there was nothing popular. There was nothing even sort of appealing specifically to her generation. If you compare it to the service for Princess Diana 25 years ago, if you remember, there was Elton John. There was a lot of stuff that was sort of very personal to her, but also to her generation. None of that. You could have done this particular service, this particular liturgy for George V.
Wow, for George V. Stephen Pincus, same question to you. What were your impressions? What are your takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, mine were similar to Bob's, with the exception that I think there was a sort of interesting interplay between the tradition of the funeral and the procession and the music and the readings, and the sort of subtle hints of innovation. So having the first Black Secretary General of the Commonwealth give a reading of a text, having the sermon being delivered by the Archbishop of Canterbury, very traditional, except that this Archbishop of Canterbury happens to be the grandson of a Jew, and then having all of the various statements made by various religious leaders of non-Anglican denominations. So the Catholic Archbishop of Westminster, the two competing archbishops of Armagh, the leader of the Free Protestant churches, all of that indicates a sort of more of an ecumenicism and a sort of move towards indicating a more modern Britain, a changed Britain. So that sort of struck me. And I guess I was also struck by another interesting thing. When Elizabeth's casket was transferred from the carriage into the hearse, that took place right outside of Wellington Arch, right beside Wellington Arch. Now, of course, Wellington Arch is named after the Duke of Wellington, and it's right by his own London residence, Apsley House. And it's important to remember that the Duke of Wellington was Prime Minister when the Great Reform Act, the single biggest transformation of the British Constitution, took place. And I think it's an interesting moment to think and reflect on that at this moment when there's a serious chance of a devolution or complete independence of Scotland and possibly Northern Ireland joining with the Republic. I mean, if Sinn Féin gets its way. So this is a moment of constitutional crisis in Britain, but also for the empire, as Antigua is already discussing getting rid of the monarch as the head of state. Jamaica might well be doing so in the future, and Australia, which has already had a referendum on becoming a republic, might well revisit this issue.
So the Queen, we know that the funeral itself was held at Westminster Abbey, and the Queen had a lot of history with the Abbey. Professor Buchholz, give us a sense of some of that history that she had.
Well, of course, this is where she was crowned in 1953, and if you've ever seen those films, it's very moving. This young, fairly slight woman making all these promises. I believe the ceremony lasted something like 3.5 hours. She's wearing the heavy imperial crown. And it was, at the time, and when you watch it now, it's hard for people not to feel for her and feel that she's taking on this tremendous task, which of course she was. And then everything comes full circle to her funeral in the Abbey today. At the same time, what struck me was all the resonances with Windsor, which was a place the royal family loves. In fact, they're named after Windsor Castle, and the fact that for her to be buried at Windsor is a kind of a coming home.
She herself played a great role in planning the events of the last 10 days and her funeral. Professor Pincus, tell us what she did and how this funeral kind of compares to her father's, which obviously was not televised.
Yeah, I mean, this is not, I mean, to be honest, that's more sort of in Bob's realm of expertise. I'm less a student of ceremonial and more a student of politics. But it does strike me that you know, I mean, the London Bridge plan and her involvement indicates something of her attention to detail and her attention to, or her insistence on continuity. I mean, I think her view, I mean, I think she understood very well, perhaps much better than many people, how the monarchy as an institution is in a very fragile position in the modern world. And I think she understood this from the death of Diana, where she gave that sort of wonderful speech, which in many ways resuscitated the monarchy. I mean, that is to say, the attitude towards the monarchy were at its lowest ebb after Diana's death, and she gave that wonderful speech, which seemed to embrace both Diana's legacy, but also all Britons in a sort of new kind of way. I think that sensitivity then that she gave 25 years ago, almost exactly 25 years ago, and her own sensitivity to how the ceremonial of her funeral and the 10 days of mourning would be so important for reestablishing the monarchy under her son. I think that was the kind of detail and the kind of attention to the institution, which, I mean, for her was very, very near and dear.
Professor Buchholz, do you want to jump in there? Go ahead.
I really do. You could really combine both our points. In a way, what we saw was this very traditional ceremony, very traditional prayers and music intoned by people from a wide variety of backgrounds, various religious backgrounds. And so you sort of have the Queen sort of trying to bring those people into the monarchy or bring the monarchy to them in a way that makes it more universal. than just a celebration of Englishness. And that, at her best, that was her genius.
So, millions, hundreds of thousands, a whole lot, not really sure the exact numbers, lined up, camped out over the last 10 days to bid farewell. But of course, not everyone in Britain still celebrates the existence of the monarchy, and we've already discussed some members of the realm or the Commonwealth considering removing the monarch as the head of state. There's not going to be another woman as monarch as long as the monarchy does remain, and there won't be another woman to serve as sovereign for literally generations. Do you think, unless something happens, do you think, how do you think that serves the case for the monarchy?
Well, first of all, those questions aren't going to go away, and they're very, very legitimate questions. And I think people have remarked that when you see Charles, when you see him walking behind the coffin, if you see him at Buckingham Palace, that he seems to have the weight of the world on his shoulders. And I think that has to do with his new job, and it has to do with the troubles in his family. But I think it also has to do with the fact that he was a history major at Cambridge, and he knows very well what the history of the monarchy is and the history of the empire is, and that he's going to have to begin to address these issues in a way perhaps more than his mother did, because they could be swept under the rug a little bit towards the end of the reign. That's no longer the case, and he knows it, and it's a big task.
All right, that's where we'll have to leave it. Of course, we'll talk again next year at his coronation. Professors Robert Buchholz and Stephen Pincus, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And stay with WTTW for a recap of events from Queen Elizabeth's funeral today. That's coming up right after our program at 8 here on WTTW. Up next, a worker shortage in the restaurant industry. That's in a conversation that first aired on Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, with Univision's Alex Hernandez. But first, a look at the weather.
Despite many businesses opening up after the COVID shutdown, restaurants say they are still struggling to fill the void of employees. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reports nearly 1.3 million job openings in the accommodations and food industry, which make up 11% of total openings across all occupations nationwide. The shortage has caused a strain on current restaurant workers, shortened business hours, and even led to the closing of many restaurants. Joining us now with more are Robert Gomez, owner of Beat Kitchen, and Sam Sanchez, chairman of the Illinois Restaurant Association. Welcome both. Thank you for joining us today. New data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics show that there are increased job openings for those in the restaurant industry. Sam, why are businesses still struggling to find workers to fill these roles?
We have a lot of reasons here. I mean, a lot of new industries. You know, cannabis took a lot of our employees during the pandemic. They decided not to come back. The Uber delivery drivers and the driving services, you know, Lyft took a lot of our employees during the shutdown of the pandemic, and the cannabis took a lot of our employees during the shutdown of the pandemic. We continue to put offers out there for more jobs, signing bonuses. The labor cost has increased up to 30%, and it's a great time to be able to apply for a restaurant. The $15 minimum wage is something of the past, doesn't exist anymore. People are coming in at $18, $19, $20, $21 an hour, up to $25 an hour. I mean, I would have really advised for people to apply now.
And even with that, we're still seeing shortages. Robert, realistically speaking, the pandemic showed many people that work from home is a possibility and they get paid doing it. Why should individuals return to an in-person occupation when they can work from home?
Well, absolutely. That's difficult to compete with. Who doesn't? I'm working in my make-believe office now. It's impossible to compete with that and all the other factors that Sam mentioned, especially when there just aren't enough people. This country's economy has always been built on the influx of immigrants throughout its history. It's its own part of our culture and our society, and we shut that off. It just took time for us to finally feel the pinch, because this has been going on for a while, but we're just not allowing what we need in immigrant workers to come into the country.
Right. You live this every day, Robert. Can you give us a picture of what this shortage looks like on the ground?
Oh, you're begging, borrowing, and stealing. You go into another restaurant, you see who you hope is a good employee, and ask them what they're getting paid, and I'll give you $2 or $3 more if you can afford to do that. So I'm both an operator within a small neighborhood, and I have businesses that are downtown. Downtown is easier. There's still tourism. There's a lot of foot traffic, so I can help big people there. But the neighborhood spots are going to have a very difficult time being able to compete with as or in whole that has higher volume, and so we're going to see a lot of smaller operators really struggle, and just like the rest of the economy, smaller businesses that really struggle.
Right, and I imagine a lot of people have to do longer hours because there's a shortage. Definitely, Sam. Do you think restaurants will ever return back to how things were before COVID?
We're definitely hoping. I mean, it's never going to be the same experience as staying home and ordering and getting the delivery. I think that networking is really important for the happy hour. The financial district is definitely not back. I mean, we're lucky if there's maybe 30% of the financial district back. I mean, from over 600,000 employees that form the financial district, I mean, we're lucky if there's 200,000 back. We know that the competition on the street and networking in person is going to draw the people back to work. It's going to bring people back to the downtown area. Hopefully that the service restaurants that occupied the common areas and these high-rise and these buildings could go back to business. They're about to go under. They're about to close. I mean, we continue to see this shortage of labor. What's happening now is that we will see that we came into open when the summer jobs, were available. So a lot of people went to the summer jobs, and they're not going to quit those jobs, not knowing if the restaurants were going to get shut down. Now that we're hoping that once those summer jobs are shut down, which is all the landscapings and roofings and contractors, and they can come back to work.
Right.
What we're missing here is a push from the financial district to bring people back to work in the office.
Definitely. Robert, I have the same question for you. Do you think we'll get back to the way things worked before COVID?
If you remember, during COVID, there was a shortage. Now you open up the economy and COVID starts to have less of an impact on our economy. Now we have a more serious shortage. Not without our politicians getting together and coming to an agreement on how people illegally into this country, so we have a labor force that we can draw from. It will not bounce back. We don't have the people to support. I opened up on Navy Pier, and I took over the Riva space. It's called Bar Sullivan. It's a big upstairs room. I can't staff it. It's big of a space, and there aren't enough people.
Right. Sam, what suggestions do you have for restaurants that want to retain workers? What lessons can we learn from this moment?
Here, number one, everybody knows, you can work for less money if you're treated properly and you get the right benefits. It's not only about money, it's about where you feel at home, where you feel comfortable. We're working, I'm going to jump on this really quick because it's important.
We have less than 2 minutes, Sam.
Okay. Yeah, this is really quick. So the deliveries are really important. So we're working on legislation right now to get the high school kids who are undocumented to get their driver's ed license. We're working on getting undocumented chauffeur license in the state of Illinois. So we're moving forward and providing more labor, more service. It's a matter of time. Robert said the same thing. It's right. It's a matter of time. We will come back at full force. It's just a matter of time.
Right. We have a very little time, but I want to get this question in. As you probably know, Texas Governor Greg Abbott sent buses of migrants to major cities, including Chicago. Has there been any outreach from restaurants to these migrants? Is that the workforce that we're missing? Real quick, both.
Yeah, so really quick. They cannot work. They are told that you can, as under the asylum law, you cannot work until you get a work visa, which is 190 days. So they're sitting there, 180 days. They're sitting there waiting for the work visa. We can't hire them.
Right, but after they get it?
After they get it, we'll definitely hire them.
Okay.
We'll hire them, but it just that's not enough.
Okay.
We need millions of people in this country.
Wow.
We are that short nationwide.
Incredible that we have to talk about a shortage of employees still to this day. Robert Gomez, Sam Sanchez, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Alex, thank you.
Back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that is our show for this Monday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. More on the jury verdict ordering Sterigenics to pay millions for decades of toxic air pollution in suburban Willowbrook. And a Little Village native is bringing something new to 26th Street by making a sweet treat the old-fashioned way. And remember to stay tuned for special PBS coverage of the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.